Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to tonight's night-ending bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to tonight's night-ending bonus, shall we? Today's first encounter. A few years back, my girlfriend and I, having hiked several parts of the Appalachian Trail, decided we wanted to give the southern portion of Virginia's trail a shot. It's about 166 miles long and runs through George Washington and Jefferson National Forests, from Roanoke County to Parisburg in Gillis County. This is definitely one of the more remote and less traveled parts of the trail, which is exactly what we were looking for. We gathered our gear and made our way to the start of the Virginia Creeper Trail to begin our journey. We had planned our journey to end at Damascus and figured that by the time we got done there, we would be more than ready to get home to our own beds. It was early October, and the changing of the leaves and colors were amazing. The air was crisp and cool, perfect hiking weather with beautiful scenery. The majority of the trip was pretty uneventful, just your typical hike, but our last couple of nights is where things get weird. On this portion of the trail, you are supposed to camp on the trail or designated shelter. We didn't really want to run into other people and didn't want anyone coming up on us in the middle of the night. We decided to ignore those suggestions and find our own little spot off the trail. A little searching around, and we found a spot a little ways off the trail in the middle of a small clearing. It was perfect. We set up camp, cooked some food, talked for a while, then snuggled up and went to sleep for the night. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, I was awoken by my girlfriend shaking me awake, telling me, "Get your gun. Someone or something is outside walking around our tent." She informed me that she had woken up to what sounded like someone right outside of the tent, running a knife or something alongside while circling us. When hiking, I carry a 1911 and a judge with me. You never know exactly who or what you may run into when you are on such a long hike in a remote location. I got the judge out of my pack, and then we finally sat silently, listening for any sounds. A few minutes of nothing but the breeze blowing through the trees, and then I heard it. Snap, crunch, snap, someone or something walking in the woods behind our tent. I got the flashlight and silently made my way out of the tent. Our fire had gone out, so it was nearly pitch black, illuminated by only the dim glow of the October moon. I told my girlfriend to stay put while I checked it out. I didn't flick the flashlight on right away, so as not to give away that I was out of the tent and have it become a shining beacon of my location. Instead, I waited to hear more noises. After a few moments, snap, crunch, crack, it sounded like it was bipedal, based on the way the steps were paced. I turned on the flashlight and flooded the area with the light. I thought I saw someone move behind a tree. I yelled out and told them to go away, that I was armed. I kept the light on the area with my gun drawn and slowly approached toward the area where I had seen the figure. Then, from my right, I hear what sounds like someone running away through the woods. I spin and face my light that way. And then from the original spot, hear who or whatever was there take off into the woods. There's no way I'm giving chase, so I return to the campsite. I tell my girlfriend about what had happened and ended up sitting guard outside the tent in the darkness until daybreak. In the morning, I looked around a bit for signs of who or whatever it was, and I discovered a track of some sorts in the soft, moist dirt not far from our tent. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't my girl's. This freaked it out and confirmed that something, perhaps more than one, was sulking around our tent at night. I kept it to myself because I didn't want to freak my girlfriend out any more than she already was. At this point, we were pretty deep in and still had 2 days left. That day, we walked a little faster than normal and covered as much ground as possible. When it came to set up camp, I found a spot near a cliff where we could place the tent in a small overhang and prevent anyone from coming behind us. The whole day up till this point, I had a feeling we were being followed. I had no confirmation of this, as I hadn't heard or seen anything else, just a gut feeling. We set up camp, made some food, then retreated into our tent. I gave my girl my 1911, and I kept the judge right next to me and assured her that if I slept at all, it would be with one eye open. After a while, she drifted off to sleep, and I stayed awake listening to the sounds in the woods at this night. I was awake for a few hours just waiting to see if anything was going to happen. At some point, I guess my exhaustion caught up with me and I drifted off. I awoke sometime later to what sounded like someone going through our stuff outside of our tent. I grabbed my gun and woke my girlfriend, shushing her. From the faint glow of the fire, I could see someone or something silhouette against the tent. There was really someone out there. I yelled out to them, something along the lines of, "We are armed, get the F out of here." They dropped what they were doing and bolted. I came out of the tent, gun drawn, ready to shoot. Our stuff was strewn all about. They had rummaged through quite a bit of our stuff. I walked to the edge of the woods in the direction who or whatever was that fled. There was a creek nearby, and I walked to the edge where there was a small trail running alongside it. Down the creek, I could see a light. It looked like a lantern the way it flickered. Then I saw 3 more emerge from the other side of the woods. I told my girlfriend to start packing up whatever she could. We were leaving now. We packed up everything of value, left the tent and a few other items, and headed back onto the trail in the middle of the night. I kept hearing people making sounds off in the woods, hearing branches snap quite some ways. I kept looking behind us every few seconds to make sure nothing or nobody was coming upon us. It was completely nerve-wracking. If something happened, we were still a long way from anywhere, and quite literally on our own. Since we hadn't seen another hiker the entire time we had been out there, I really felt like we were in serious danger. We had been walking for quite some time when I heard something in the woods behind us. As we rounded a corner, I turned around and saw someone step out onto the trail and just stand there watching us. It was just as the sun was coming up and barely any light. I couldn't make out any features, just a silhouette. I stopped and looked at them for a second and asked them who they were and what they wanted. They just stood there silently watching us and then turned and walked back into the woods. We picked up the pace and kept going, looking back every so often. We didn't see them again, but my gut told me they were still there for quite a ways. We eventually reached the end of the trail and got back to where we had parked my girlfriend's car. Extremely exhausted, we had made it out of the Virginia woods without becoming a meal for a clan of cannibalistic inbred hillbillies, which is what I pictured happening in my head the whole time. I have no idea where this clan of deformed hillbillies came from, what they wanted, or why they were hunting us. I'll never know, because I will not be returning to find out. Tonight's second encounter. This happened during the summer of 1982, right after we had graduated from high school. Two friends and I decided to take a few days to go backpacking in the Ouachita National Forest in far southeast Oklahoma. Specifically, we were on the Winding Stair Mountain, where there is a national hiking trail that follows along the crest of that mountain. It's really more like a ridge than a mountain, and although it is called a mountain, we are not talking elevations like in the Rockies, for example. Winding Star Mountain probably averages between 2,000 to 2,500 feet, but for Oklahoma, that's pretty high. On the second night of our trip, we stopped to camp along a stretch of trail that overlooks a valley. At the bottom of the valley, a couple of miles away, you can see a lake called Lake Banyan. And although we couldn't see it from our vantage point, next to the lake is a Boy Scout camp called Camp Tom Hale. One of my friends on this trip had been in Boy Scouts, and he had spent some time at that camp. And as you might expect, they told stories to each other about a Bigfoot-like monster that roamed those woods. Anyway, we set up camp right on the hiking trail. In fact, we built our campfire ring on the trail itself. The reason is because the trail was broad, hard-packed bare earth, so we felt this was the safest. Besides, we hadn't seen any other hikers during this time out here, and we promised ourselves that the next morning we would be completely dousing the coals and redispersing the fire ring rocks. That way, there would hardly be any trace that we were there and built a fire. For sleeping, I had brought a mesh hammock, which I strung up between two trees. I set it up parallel to the trail, and I had the campfire to my immediate left. My two friends slept in the ground, spreading out a tarp and sleeping bags directly opposite of the camp from me. On the other side of the trail to my right, I had a nice view of that valley and the lake, with the mountain sloping down away from me. As it got dark, we cooked our dinner over the fire, BS'd around it for a while, and then finally turned in for the night. It was beautiful, clear summer night with a soft breeze coming up from the valley. We continued to talk for a while after everyone had gone to bed, but I eventually drifted off to sleep in my hammock. At some point during the night I woke up. I'm not sure. I had a watch on me, but I didn't remember now the exact time. However, it must have been well after midnight, because I saw that our campfire had burned itself down to a bed of coals. I lied there for a minute, looking up at the stars through the pine tree tops, wondering what had caused me to wake up. Then I heard it. It sounded like something walking through the underbrush, up the slope to my right and towards our camp. It would walk a little, stop, then walk some more, stop again. But it was definitely getting closer. Now I'm no expert woodsman, but to me it didn't sound like a four-footed animal, which would make more of a sound like a continuous rustle through the leaves and underbrush. This sounded like individual footsteps, like something walking on 2 feet. There was really nothing I could think to do, except just keep quiet, wait and see what would happen. The only weapons I had with me was my hatchet for chopping firewood and a hunting knife. Unfortunately, I had both of these with me in my hammock. Sheathed, of course, because, well, I'm paranoid like that, so I quickly unsheathed them, clutching one in each hand, waiting and listening. Whatever it was finally got to be what it sounded like a few dozen feet from our camp, and then stopped again. Next, instead of coming closer, it circled our camp, and of course it circled the camp in the direction that had it going behind me as I lie in the hammock, rather than in the direction that my feet were pointing. This meant that if it approached closer, I could not see what it was without sitting up or even rolling completely out of my hammock and falling. Eventually it circled around until it was directly behind my head as I lie in the hammock, but still keeping its distance. Then things got quiet again. You will remember that I mentioned that the hiking trail was broad, hard-packed earth. I thought to myself, whatever it is could now just walk down the trail towards our camp and not make a sound. I wouldn't even know it was there until it was literally standing right next to me, where I could look up from my hammock and see it. Have you ever heard the saying about your blood running cold? Well, it's true. I actually felt like I had ice running through my veins at this point. However, a moment later, the sounds of it walking through the leaves and underbrush started again. It had not walked down the trail towards our camp after all, but had instead crossed the trail and was now behind me and to my upper left. It continued to circle our camp until it got to a point roughly directly to my left, a few dozen feet beyond the spot where my friends were sleeping. It stopped there for a few minutes, and then began retracing its steps. It crossed the trail again directly up behind me as I lie in my hammock, and walked back into the underbrush to my right. It circled back around until it was directly right again, approximately to where it had started, and then it went back down the mountainside until I could no longer hear it in the distance as it moved through the underbrush. I continued to lie there in my hammock wondering, WTF, what it could have been. Suddenly, one of my friends whispered out of the darkness on the other side of the fire ring, "Hey Brett, are you awake?" I replied that I was, and he asked, "Did you hear it too?" This was the friend who had been a Boy Scout. I said, "Yeah, it woke me up, and I lied there listening to it the whole time." Then we both got up and immediately built our campfire back up. We saved some firewood to use for cooking breakfast the following morning, but we threw it all on the fire. We sat there for a while talking, comparing notes about what we had heard. Eventually, we both calmed down, finally went back to bed with no further incidents. The third guy had slept through the whole thing. He didn't even wake up when we got up and rebuilt the fire. The next day, we headed back down the trail toward the trailhead, spent the third night on the mountain with nothing unusual happening, went home the following day. We actually went backpacking out there again a few times over the last couple of years when we were all home from college or whatever, but nothing like that had ever happened again. And now it's been decades since the last time I was down in that part of the state. Tonight's final experience. I need validation that I am not insane. I've never really had paranormal experiences. I can't explain this. I'm in college, and me and some other 7 people from school went on a backpacking trip. And we had 2 experienced leaders. We drove to Zaleski State Forest, which is in the Appalachian region of Ohio. It was early April this year. It was cold and everything was still dead from winter. After hiking miles into the forest, we set up camp at a backpacking campsite, and there were a couple other groups of people as well. A few of them were friendly older couples, and then 2 college-age girls. Everyone was pretty spread out from each other. We set up our camp further away from everyone else. I've always been able to sense the energies of places, and the energy in this place was not great. It was spooky. Each of us had an individual 1-person tent, and we kind of formed a cluster in this site, with my tent being in the back, so no one was behind me. Our cluster was also right next to the forest, because this backpacking campsite was like a big cleared-off square in the middle of the woods. Fast forward, I'm dead asleep, 2 a.m. I wake up to leaves crunching behind my tent. I hear footsteps walking in circles around my tent. They had a sort of heaviness to them. Couldn't have been a deer or a dog. It sounded like it was on 2 legs. This creature was circling my tent for long periods of time, slowly creeping up to the side of my tent, then just stopping for periods of time, and then would not move. Then it'd start again, moving around our tent cluster. I could hear a human-like breathing from the mouth when it was close to my tent, like a light sort of heaving. I was shaking, too scared to unzip my tent and investigate. I kid you not, this occurred for hours and seemed like I was the only one awake. Out of nowhere, I see an illuminated light shape from my tent, although I couldn't tell what it was from inside my tent because I was zipped up. It was like a warm glow, and it didn't move, like a flashlight would. I was paralyzed with fear. I simply couldn't believe it was an animal. At some point I fell asleep due to sheer exhaustion, but I could hear the heavy footsteps circling until I did. In the morning I questioned my fellow campers about it, and my leader admitted she had heard the footsteps and noises as well, admitting it was bizarre and she would investigate it when she wasn't so groggy. One of the boys in the group said he had also noticed a light had come on, but thought that it was someone else. Not a single person in this group went up to go to the restroom or turn on that light. I've heard things about the Appalachian regions being creepy and bizarre, and now I believe it. Some people have leaned towards Bigfoot because apparently he is associated with light orbs. I've never been a Bigfoot believer, but I am telling you this. This didn't feel like just any animal. Alright folks, just a quick little bonus upload to end our night with. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting this channel. After all, it is your support that helps this channel continue to grow and go. And also what makes it a place for people to want to share their experiences, ideas, and theories without judgment or ridicule. Just simply treated with the same respect we all deserve. Thank you. Guys, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, our family, and friends. These creatures are real. They're out there and they're dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless.